right? Other than what's in the Bible, there is no other writings at all, contemporary writings from anyone
About Jesus?
about seeing Jesus after he died.
Well,
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Grab a seat for this one, because today we are sitting in on a conversation that gets right down to the foundation of an entire faith. A few Christian believers sit across from a skeptic, and what starts as a calm chat about the resurrections slowly turns into something way bigger. They bring up persecution, eyewitnesses, doctors, even ancient historians to prove their case. The skeptic just keeps asking one simple thing back: where is the actual evidence? And by the end, that one question does a lot of work. Stick around all the way through, because this one builds, and the strongest moment is absolutely near the finish line. You do not want to miss how it lands. Also, quick thing before we jump in, drop a comment and let me know where in the world you are watching from right now. I genuinely love seeing how far this community reaches. Alright, enough from me, let's get into it.
Okay, I think it's a good plan to bring up the agreeing side.
So when we talk about the resurrection of Christ, this is where I get, I don't know, a bit more philosophical and a bit more, I lean more heavily on my background in psychology. So there's kind of four counterclaims to the resurrection of Christ. One is that he was not crucified. One is that his body was stolen from the tomb. One is that Jesus never existed in the first place and he was more of a figure, so to speak, or he escaped. Not to say that lack of evidence is evidence, but there's not a whole lot of strong evidence outside. If you want to get into the Jesus never existed claims, there's something to stand on with that. But the other three, there's not a whole lot there outside of some Islamic texts that you can get into. But I look more heavily, and this is where I get philosophical with it, I look at the response of the resurrection of Christ. You know, if someone doesn't genuinely, wholeheartedly believe in something, then they're not going to act in accordance with it, generally speaking. Let's use this as an example. If there was a prompt that we didn't feel super strongly about, we're not going to get passionate. Like, it's not going to invoke and motion us and call us to respond or whatever it may be. Early Christians, and this is, I know you love Roman history, so I know you love the Colosseum. Early Christians, their children would be like fed to lions as a display of show for the Roman citizens at the times. Christians were being killed in mass numbers, right? The persecution that the early church faced, like early church faced, was insane. And that's something that's recorded both in historical texts from that time, as well as in church tradition as well. And so I look at that and I cannot philosophically or psychologically come to a conclusion as to why someone who made something up would go through that type of persecution. Like, I agree later on, especially with the rise of the Roman Catholic Church, there was a lot of power in the church, but there wasn't initially. And so why would you go through all those years of persecution, all those years of trial, all those years of killing and just pain? And not just that, be so countercultural to it as well. Like, the early church were one of the first people that in Roman society like condemned the practice of like the Malicos we were talking about earlier, like that boy prostitution. They were some of the first ones that condemned that. They were some of the first ones that condemned the practice of polygamy at that time. They were some of the first ones that condemned the treatment of women during that time. They were so countercultural based on the response of one thing that maybe did or did not happen, that it just doesn't seem logical to me.
I think it's a little bit more logical than you might believe. From a sociological standpoint, persecution builds up beliefs.
Correct.
And genuine belief in something doesn't mean that that thing is true. There are people to this day who die for things that they believe in that you would believe isn't true. So I wouldn't find that to be a convincing like metric about the truth of a belief.
Okay, this is the apologetics argument I hear every single time, and I need you to understand why it collapses the moment you actually think about it. The Christian leans on his psychology background and says this: he cannot come to a conclusion as to why someone who made something up would go through that type of persecution. And I get why it feels powerful. It sounds deep, but it's one of the weakest pillars in the entire playbook. Here's the problem. He's treating sincerity like a lie detector. He's basically saying that because early believers suffered under Rome, the thing they believed must be real. No. Willingness to suffer proves you believe something. It tells you nothing about whether that something is true. And the atheist catches this instantly. He says persecution builds up beliefs. That pressure makes people dig harder. That's not divine confirmation. That's basic human psychology under threat. Then he drops the line that should end this entire branch of the debate. The atheist said this: there are people to this day who die for things they believe in that you would believe isn't true. That is the checkmate. Every faith on earth has martyrs. Every cause has people willing to die. If dying for a belief made it true, then a dozen contradictory religions would all be true at the same time, which is impossible. And here's what people don't realize. The apologist almost argues against himself. He admits the church only gained real power later on, which quietly destroys his own romantic image of pure, selfless early believers. He said this: "They were so countercultural based on the response of one thing that maybe did or did not happen. Maybe did or did not happen." He said the quiet part out loud, and he didn't even catch it.
You're right. I think it holds weight, though. We don't have a CSI lab that was there. We do have studies. Doctors have done studies. You mentioned the water that flowed from his side, and there's doctors say, "Oh yeah, that was this." And I don't have it off the top of my head what they were describing, but
If I could tell you. So once you die, your blood separates. Right?
pericardial.
Yeah, and so your white blood cells and platelets come out looking like water
Yeah.
compared to the red blood cells. Yeah.
So thank you. And so there's that. But then I will add to this, and I know that this may not be helpful, but like, we're talking about somebody I know. He's everything to me. And he, I have this relationship with Jesus, and he's my best friend. And I know that doesn't really answer the prompt. I could talk about, evidence that demands a verdict. There's resources out there. I would describe what you were calling, nobody really dies for a lie, right? And so, you could argue with that or whatever.
Hellbop's comment.
What's that?
Hellbop's comment.
I didn't understand it.
The Branch Davidians.
The brand, yeah.
Suicide bombers.
Sure.
There's plenty of people. How many Muslims die on a regular basis? I mean,
Yeah, so I'm just saying that, as he said, faith is part of the answer. So, but there's always going to be the faith piece. And if he's not real, if he's not present, then, and if he didn't raise from the dead, even Paul says, then our faith is a lie, and, nothing really matters. So
My question is, does it take faith to believe that the science is real?
No, because it's. I mean, the scientific method is just going through testing, and then proving something or disproving something, and then testing again, and then testing again, and then testing again. And so it's all about fact-based, right? So faith is the things that you can't see, the things that you can only believe in, right?
You have to have skepticism for what.
What's Hebrews 1:11?
Hebrews 11:1.
Oh, 11, yeah.
Faith is substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen.
Right. And that's a great example of what faith is, right? And so science is the antithesis of that.
I don't have faith in science. When they come out with something, I know that research in the future might disprove the current theories.
Right.
Or the current experiences. So when something is proven to an extent scientifically, I don't have faith in that. It's the best evidence that we currently have for something, but I understand and I'm flexible that we might have more information later that proves that to be false.
Now watch what happens when the evidence gets thin, because the believers immediately retreat into feelings. One of them straight up admits this isn't really about proof. He said this: "He's everything to me. I have this relationship with Jesus, and he's my best friend." And look, I'm not going to mock anybody's personal comfort, but you cannot bring a relationship as evidence in a debate about whether an event physically happened. Your emotional attachment to a claim is not data. That distinction gets blurred over and over here. But the moment that genuinely got me was the martyr exchange. The Christians point to modern people who die for their faith to defend the idea that nobody dies for a lie. And then one of them basically concedes the entire thing, saying there's always going to be the faith piece. Do you see what just happened? They tried to use martyrs as proof. The atheist showed martyrs exist across beliefs they think are false, and instead of fighting it, they fold straight back into faith. That isn't defending the point. That's quietly walking away from it. And then we get the science line, which I find fascinating. The Christian says faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen, and that science is the antithesis of that. He's framing having no evidence as a virtue. And the atheist responds with the most reasonable thing said in this whole stretch. He said this: "I don't have faith in science. It's the best evidence we currently have, but I'm flexible that we might get more information later that proves it false." That is intellectual honesty. One side treats certainty without evidence as holy. The other says, "I'll change my mind the second better evidence shows up." You have to understand which of those two is actually chasing the truth.
Having been someone who was raised in the church and then left the church, I can't argue the power of faith when you do have it to guide you to do things. But the thing is, those things can be very, very good, very, very godly in the sense that we want to think of God as a benevolent God, or extremely malicious to the point that we see, I mean, the horrific occurrences that have happened in cults or the things that we see happening frequently in the higher powers of the Catholic Church.
Can I ask you guys a question? There's a few things that you guys brought up that I kind of wanted to touch on. Eyewitness, right? And so you believe that when Paul said that, he met with the 500 after and they saw and believed, right?
Yeah,
And then,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
And so, I mean, those your witnesses, right? Those are your eyewitnesses you're talking about.
Well, along with the original,
the writers of
yeah.
the Gospels, and out of all those people, right? Other than what's in the Bible, there is no other writings at all, contemporary writings from anyone
about Jesus,
about seeing Jesus after he died.
Well, there's definitely writings about the body going missing. I mean, there's writings of Roman and Jewish leaders looking for the body and being unable to find it.
In the Bible. There's no
outside of the
contemporary.
Bible.
No, there's no contemporary writing.
I would agree that it's not explicitly speaking of a resurrection, but texts talking about like the body itself being missing from the tomb.
I would love to know what those are in.
I don't know if Josephus specifically mentions that part.
He does not. So Josephus does. I question that text as well, because Josephus says Jesus the Messiah, and he was a Jewish man. For a Jewish man to call somebody a Messiah, kind of crazy, right? Instead
It
of
is,
like Jesus,
especially he was a servant of Rome.
Right.
Yeah.
And so and there's a lot of other theologians that agree with that, right? That is sus, right?
No, if you have sources, I mean, please send them to him to send them to me, because I am always open to reading these sources.
Okay, this final stretch is where the resurrection case quietly falls apart, and I need you to pay attention to how it falls apart, because it's not loud, it's not dramatic, it just dissolves. It starts with one of them, someone who was raised in the church and walked away, making a point that's honestly brave. He talks about how faith can guide people toward genuinely good things, but that the exact same mechanism can push people into cults or into the worst abuses of religious power. That's the key insight right there. Faith is a tool, and a tool doesn't care what you build with it. The same total conviction can build a hospital or a horror. So conviction by itself proves nothing about whether the underlying claim is true. Then the atheist asks the question that ends the historical argument. He said this: other than what's in the Bible, there is no other writings at all, contemporary writings from anyone about seeing Jesus after he died. And the Christian tries to fight back. He said this: there's definitely writings about the body going missing, writings of Roman and Jewish leaders looking for the body. Sounds impressive, right? Except the atheist immediately corners him. He said this: there's no Bible, there's no contemporary writing, meaning the so-called outside sources are sitting inside the very book in question. You cannot use the Bible to independently verify the Bible. That's circular, and it just collapsed in real time. And here's something you should actually know, because this is documented history, not my opinion. The believers fall back on Josephus, a first-century historian. But the famous passage where Josephus appears to call Jesus the Messiah, known to scholars as the Testimonium Flavianum, is widely regarded as having been altered or partly inserted by later Christian copyists. A devout Jewish historian casually calling someone the Messiah set off alarm bells a long time ago. Even the people in this debate feel it, admitting the text is suspect, and then the ending. This is my favorite part. The atheist simply says this: if you have sources, please send them to me. I am always open to rating these sources. No yelling, just an open hand asking for evidence that never arrives. And that silence, that empty space where the proof should be, is the entire debate in one moment. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.